Alrighty, we'll go ahead and get started here. Welcome everybody. This is the Progress in 2017 webinar. It is hosted by the Council to Advance Hunting and the Shooting Sports. I hope you guys all had a chance to get settled back into the swing of things after the long holidays and SHOT Show and all the different trade shows and whatnot. We're going to get into it here, but before I start going over the agenda, if you have any questions during the webinar, please post them on the bottom right-hand box. It's the chat box. Please post away during the webinar and ask questions, and then we are going to come back to those questions afterwards. We'll have about 30 minutes for question and answering, so we'll get to your questions at the end. All right, so we're going to talk through some updates on the national plan and then also what the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports has going on this year. So we'll start with the overview of just the council, kind of a brief introduction and what they're planning on doing. Updates to the plan. A lot of you have read the plan, are working on stepping down the plan and whatnot, so there have been a couple changes. And then what opportunities are in store for you guys this year working with the council. We got some R3 community updates, just kind of update on what we're going to be doing with the R3 community website this year. And then, yeah, we'll just have some time for questions. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce CEO of the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports, John Frampton.
Thank you, Marty. I'm glad to be with you. What I'd like to do is just briefly give you a quick overview of how we came about establishing the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports. And this all started back about 2006 through the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. And at that time, I think many of the directors realized that we really weren't communicating very well with the industry. And of course, they have a vested interest in the PR program because the excise taxes that they pay. And so we started what we referred to at the time was the Industry Agency Coalition, where the states, some of the NGOs, and industry would meet on an annual basis and talk about cooperative relations and try to share a spirit of cooperation and the things that we were doing. And pretty quick, when we started those meetings, we realized that, you know, there was no foundation or council that addressed hunting and shooting like the Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation. So maybe what we needed to do was come together and somehow form that council or foundation. And in 2010, actually, we were chartered as the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports. We put a board together that included industry, some of the major NGOs in the country, and 8 active state Fish and Wildlife Agency directors. And now we have a 32-member board. Basically, it's 11 of the big NGOs, and it's the individual organization. It's not the person, it's the organization that's represented on that board. And if you look at the board, I won't get into all the detail there, but if you look at that board, I would contend it's probably the strongest conservation board put together in the history of conservation when you look at the players that are represented there. It didn't take long for that board to really start moving forward with an executive director, a president at the time, CEO, and an individual came on board and worked for about 3 years and left the council, and that's when I came on board. And then January of 2013, we held a meeting in Denver, and Matt Dunphy with the Wildlife Management Institute was one of the key players in that. And we brought in about 30 entities and proposed at that meeting that we start looking at a national plan, and we wanted to find out, did we have buy-in from the constituent groups out there to actually come together in consensus and develop a plan. And at the time, we knew that we had over 400 various recruitment, retention, and reactivation plans around the country through some of the work that the Wildlife Management Institute had been doing almost 10 years earlier. And believe it or not, everybody in that meeting said, this is what we need to do. We need to be doing something different. We're getting the same results. If we don't do something different, that's the way it's going to be. So right away we put together a development work group that started working on developing this national plan, with Matt being really the architect and the leader behind this. And then in October of 2016, the council
Hi everyone, if you can still hear me, it looks like we just lost audio to Cyrus and John. Give us one moment while we adjust that.
testing.
There you go. You're live, Cyrus. There you go.
Are we back?
Yes, you're back. Sorry about that.
All right, sorry about that. All right, technical difficulties always occur. Let me kind of jump forward. What we're looking at now is the opportunities for involvement of states, NGOs, industry, and all in the future, particularly as we move into the 2017 year. One of our goals is to get at least 8 states involved in developing state step-down plans. We had a few of those that were initiated back in 2016, Texas, Iowa, Missouri, for example. We have a multi-state conservation grant was awarded through the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies and the Fish and Wildlife Service to help with those state step-down plans. We also are continuing to move forward with the R3 community site. We're very excited about that. When we started that back in January of 2016, we were hoping to get about 300 individuals on that content site, and I think that as of today we're well over 600 on that. So basically our goal there was to have a site where all individuals and involvement players in the national plan could go to a site, share information. If something was working in Florida, somebody in Oregon would be able to see that. Prior to that, the key communications we had were through regional meetings and basically contact whenever people were at meetings. So this site, I think, is extremely important. We'll continue to work on that. We've got a contract with Powderhook and Marty with y'all to actually manage that site and keep it up and running. So we're really excited about that. We'll continue with the state step-down plans in the future. Looking back at the council, our purpose was simply to ensure that we had support for and active participation in hunting and shooting sports for future generations. I want to make sure my grandkids have those same opportunities that I had when I was young and even today. Our vision was an America where hunting and shooting sports are an integral part of mainstream culture and where hunters and shooters are widely recognized as premier conservation contributors. The general public really doesn't understand the value of hunting and shooting sports. We need to do a better job of educating the individuals. And of course, that's part of our mission too, is to facilitate that promotion and growth of hunting and shooting sports. All right, why do we need an R3? I think I kind of hit on that earlier, in that we had all these programs that were ongoing across the country. And I don't want anybody to think that we're saying these programs didn't work or don't work. I think what we're looking at is to make those programs better. Where would we be if we didn't have those programs is a good question. So what we want to do is really evaluate these programs, very few other than evaluated in the past, and get a better understanding of what we need to be doing as a group and building those big partnerships that we're going to need to make sure that in the future we have increased numbers of hunters and increased numbers of shooters. And I think this national plan has gone a long way to build consensus. I don't think any of us thought that the R3 would be as recognized today as it is. 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we never even used the term R3. Now we see it all over the place. So one thing I think that has happened is because of the national plan and the work that the council has done with the Wildlife Management Institute and many of the states and NGOs, the reality is the conservation community is moving forward with this national plan. They recognize the importance of it, and many of them want to be players in it. And that's one thing we want to make sure that happens as we move forward, and that is that the door is open for anybody that wants to participate in this and be a part of this national effort. They're welcome to come on board, and we want to make sure from the council standpoint, we serve as a facilitator. We don't want to coordinate and be telling anybody what to do. What we want to do is facilitate this national plan, and when we find things that are working, we want to be able to share those with the conservation community. So I think in a nutshell, that's kind of where we are with the council. We want to be, as I said, that facilitator. We want to work with everybody, and we're just very fortunate that we've had a development work group and a group of individuals that really has put a tremendous amount of time and effort in developing this plan. And right now, our council is composed of myself, Samantha Petta, and Cyrus Beard. Although Matt Dunphy works for the Wildlife Management Institute, we kind of feel like he's really on our staff as well. We've captured him as much as possible, and I'm very appreciative to Steve Williams for allowing Matt to put so much time into this. And as I said earlier, he's the real architect of this plan. And Marty, we're very grateful to the work that you've done in getting this National R3 site up and running and moving forward. It's been a learning experience for all of us, and you've done a great job with that.
Thanks for the kind words, John. Thanks for everybody being on this call. I looked at the names. I know a lot of you folks know a lot of this stuff already. But I think this is neat to sort of knit in the beginning to the end. And so what I'll do here in the next couple slides is just talk about, at a very high level, just for a few minutes here, the changes that I'm observing and several others with me are observing in our community around R3, really since the plan has been rolled out. Everybody knows, or a lot of folks know, the history prior to that. So let's talk about what happened when it hit the ground. Several of you heard me talk in the early days about what our primary challenge was, that we were doing a bunch of stuff, but we weren't really sure why that stuff was being done or what impact it had. So I use this slide you see here to pretty much describe the state of how things were. Well, I'm happy to report that I am fairly comfortable saying we are past that. We are doing a lot of good things. As John said, we're not saying all of those things are wrong. It's just that they weren't necessarily coordinated in a strategic fashion. That is starting to happen. Nationally, we're starting to ask, why are we doing things? And more importantly, we're asking, how can we improve what we're doing to really impact the resource? In this case, the resource are those hunters, anglers, shooting sports participants, trappers. We're really talking about public engagement. That conversation has changed around R3. I was just visiting with some folks this morning on it, and I think it's fair to say that one of the reasons why R3 is almost like an elephant that we have to eat is that what we're stepping on the toes of is general public engagement for agencies. And R3 is, in some ways, providing some tangible tactics and some tangible strategies for agencies and organizations to engage their public, the public specifically being hunters, anglers, trappers, and shooters. So that has been really neat to see the context that's evolving around this, and we're recognizing R3 isn't just one division, it's not one person, it's not one organization. This is really transformative change of how we approach dealing with the public that so many of us are vested in providing services for. I think a testament to the synergy that is coming with those sort of realizations is what just happened in January. A lot of you were there. For the first time, the WAFWA and MAFWA Hunting and Shooting Sports Participation Group had a combined R3 workshop. This was something that WAFWA had started, I should know this number, many, many years ago. I think this was the 6th or 7th one of these that have been done, and every year they've gotten bigger. This year we joined up with, or the Western Association joined up with MAFWA. We had about 76 people in the room for 2 solid days, and we monitored those numbers pretty well. Folks stayed in the room. And what was neat is that we were able to talk about common problems and share some common solutions, as well as propose some common ways of looking at R3 from the perspective of the participant, and how do we do things such as get our partners engaged, how do we find out resources we need, and so forth. So it was really 2 days of doing 3 things. Number one, talking about strategies that were working. That's pretty cool. We didn't have that several years ago, but we have some data now. We spent some time doing some professional development. As it has been pointed out many times, there is no R3 degree. There's no R3 textbook. There's no resources out there aside from our growing R3 community for folks to learn about R3. So we spent some time looking at ways for organizations to organize their thoughts, their actions, and their partnerships for R3. Then finally, we talked about the approaches states are taking in stepping down these tactics to their individual state. There's a large recognition that there is no one path to R3. Every state is different in its structure. Every organization is different. They have different funding, pardon me. They have different support, different levels of staffing, and all of that has to be taken into consideration. So we heard from 3 states and frankly discussed openly what are some of the struggles they're having, what are some of the successes they've seen. So at the end of this summit, I think that several things were realized. Number one, we need to keep doing these and join more regions together. But also, we need to start thinking long-term about a national R3 plan. We may visit about that a little bit more on this call. Sam may talk about that. I'm sorry, not an R3 plan, R3 meeting, where we talk about not all R3 issues, but at least national R3 issues, and bring in some larger players who at that point will be ready to have that discussion. That's very early on in the discussion phase at this point, so we're looking, year and a half, 2 years out for that. But the fact that the community told us we're ready to have that, or start thinking about that kind of a level of conversation, was very encouraging and I think very accurate. Okay, so the other big thing that has happened is much more alignment within our own ranks. As many of you know, R3 related strategies, implementations, tactics, or focuses have developed in the past decade, but the problem is they've all developed kind of independent of each other. They've been going down parallel paths, but they haven't really joined up. Those paths are starting to join up. The organizations you see listed here on this slide are representative of, in the past year, groups that have basically come together with folks that were involved with the developing the plan and said, hey, we need to look at some of this stuff in our own organization. From the angling side, RBFF really took a bold step forward, partnered with the Aquatic Resource Education Association, and developed a series of recommendations for Angler R3 using a lot of the same principles, or not using, coming up with some of the same principles and recommendations that came up on the hunting and shooting sports side. The North American Waterfowl Management Plan, we had workshops at all of the flyway councils this last year, and I was just on a call with them this morning. They're looking at how do we move forward with joining up the human dimensions aspect of NAWAMP with the North American Waterfowl Management Plan and R3. Where is the nexus there? How do we use the infrastructure of NAWAMP to work with states, and how does that all work together? So I won't spend a whole lot of time here, but whether it's Cabela's from the industry side or these trade organizations, they are all finding ways to feed into this larger R3 effort, and we're starting to see some really neat parallels evolving, and therefore some really similar tactics moving forward. So this has been really exciting since the plan has come out. I think the plan has spurned this kind of alignment that 5 years ago we could only dream of. The final thing I'll say, and then I'll turn it over to Sam, is that the era that we're in, I think this next year, is a recognition that the strategies, tactics, and information in the national plan, the National Hunting and Shooting Sports Action Plan, or RBFF's angler recommendations, or recommendations that come out of NAWAMP, all of that stuff, frankly, has to be somewhat tailored to individual organizations. So referring back to the grant that John talked about, this is what the community has told us they need. They need training. They need some, basically an outside team to come into the state, help them get going, help them talk about how to think about R3, help them, tell them a little bit about what's been working, what hasn't been working, get their stakeholders engaged, and honestly have the hard discussions around R3 that need to be had before we can move forward, and integrate all that with not only R3 best practices, but public engagement principles as well. How do we take a customer-centric view? How do we think about the missions and roles of our organizations and agencies and make sure that we're delivering that to our customers, whoever they happen to be? So this state adoption has been big and will be, I think, continue to be big in this next year. We'll do a lot more of these workshops, and what we've decided to do and are dedicated to doing is when we do these workshops, Samantha has been very good at writing up reports, and states have been very generous in being willing to post those reports on the R3 community website. My hope is that with enough early adopters that go through honestly the hard work of getting a state version of the national plan, or not, if it's not even the national plan, even just states drawing up strategic documents that guide their R3 efforts. If we can get enough of those posted, the community, leadership, as well as implementers can see that and use what others have learned to do the same thing in their own states to get the wheels going. So, real brief, a lot of words, quick and dirty, but at the end of the day, a lot of inertia has begun as a result of the plan, and I don't see it going away anytime soon. And I, like a lot of you, look forward to the challenges of keeping it going down the road, and I'm dedicated to making sure we keep that information getting kicked back to you all so that you can tell us what other needs you have, how we need to adjust approaches, and we can always be a few steps ahead of this. Okay, Sam, back to you.
Thank you, Matt. To this point, you've heard from our CEO discussing how we got to this, to develop the plan and establish a point where we can start to attack the participation trends in hunting and target shooting. Matt provided a great update on the ripple effect that the plan has had within our community. And my part of this presentation is to help increase that ripple effect and to help connect with each of you on this webinar and demonstrate how we can connect together. So Marty and I are going to talk about opportunities that focus on you and how you can engage with us on the national plan. So Matt talked about the state R3 workshops, and we are working with states in the coming months. We'd like to host at least 10 this year, focusing on stepping down the plan. These workshops are an overview of some of the basic concepts of the R3 science, outdoor recreation adoption model, looking at outcomes versus outputs, and just discussing roles and opportunities that your partners at the state level might have to engage with you to work on R3. So what you see in front of you is an image of a workshop that occurred in Iowa. And the state report, which Matt mentioned, is on the R3 website. Iowa's workshop was an external-facing workshop. They had 70 people from across their state representing multiple partners such as NWTF and Scholastic Shooting Sports Foundation. They had county staff, and then they had their own staff, internal law enforcement officers, shooting sports coordinators, fisheries, everything included, to discuss about R3 and how the Iowa DNR is going to approach it. We also can facilitate internal meetings only, and if this would be appropriate for a state agency or an organization that is still trying to get the head on around how their R3 fits with their organization. So for instance, in Missouri, we hosted a workshop for about 30 people, and that report will be forthcoming on the website as well. And essentially, we worked with all the regional staff discussing what their programs are and how it fits into the adoption model and where the agency can go with its staff to embrace R3 more. So those workshop reports, again, are going to be available on the R3 website. I really like the thought that Matt said about posting all of those reports there so other states can start to see what the early adopters have done, and we can start to build this groundswell of support and discussion and exchange. Upcoming R3 workshops, and I'm listing these not just for the state agencies, but also for the partner organizations that are on this webinar too. We have one in Florida with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission next week in Orlando, Florida, one with the Utah Division of Wildlife in March, and then one with Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife in April. If any of these seem like something that you'd be interested in attending, please reach out to me. My email is posted right here. You can contact me and we can discuss and make sure you're connected with those events. So that's a snapshot of the workshops. There will be other opportunities to engage with us throughout the year. We'll be at many events, all of the regional AFWAs. You'll see us at IHEA. If you have questions or you'd like to discuss some R3 concepts with us, please reach out to myself or Cyrus, Matt, John, whoever. And some of this conversation can occur on the R3 website, and Marty is going to discuss what you can expect from the R3 website in the coming months as well.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, so this year for the R3 community website, we're really hoping to kind of build on the utility that we already have on the website. So that's stuff like, using the different groups that we have. Anybody can go in and create a group. If you want it to be private, you can have, keep all your documents, private, just so your group can see it. You control it. It's really a great tool for, working on some of these things with different work groups. We have Michaela Ray out of Nebraska. She has a group on there for Nebraska mentors in the area. So it's a great tool just to get in there and utilize. Another thing we've been hearing a lot about is some like summarized kind of place that they can go to get kind of the first steps or what you need to know about R3 if you're new to the industry or something. So we have this idea of indexing a lot of the important documents that come across on the R3 website. So there can be one place where you can go and you can say, I'm looking for, a list of the state's step-down plans on the R3 community website. We'll have a place where you can go and you can see and you can click on it and it'll link you back into the R3 website where you can view that document. And it's just going to make things a lot easier, especially for those who are new to the industry and need to do some catching up on what's been going on. So we're going to keep on doing these webinars and podcasts and whatnot. So if you guys have any ideas for a different webinar or podcast, please reach out to me, Marty at powderhook.com, or you can reach out to me on the R3 community website. Let us know what you're thinking. We're really doing these just to try and give you guys more information, and you might also see us around at some of the different conferences. We're going to maybe do some fun little videos or just some little videos to get some faces out there and just some little tidbits of details on what people are up to and working on. So that's kind of what you can expect out of the R3 community site this year. We do have some upcoming webinars. We're going to do one next month with Brian Clark with Kentucky. He's the one who did the locavore.guide. We've done a podcast with him and then also a webinar, I believe, with him. And he's launched his website, and they're going to kind of present it to everybody and show them what they've all got working on there. It's going to be a great webinar, so stay tuned for details on that. March, we're going to do kind of a summary of a state's approach at stepping down the plan. I know that we've been working with some, Sam and Matt have been working with some states, and we're going to have a couple states on there to kind of tell us what they did, their process on stepping down the plan and what that looks like. And then April, we're going to kind of go through some more customer segments that the Southwick Associates on their data dashboard, I believe, and kind of what we're missing and how you guys can help out and what we can all do here. So without further ado, I'll turn it back to Sam, and she can wrap us up.
Thank you, Marty. We're excited about the growth of the R3 community. John had mentioned we're approaching 700 members now, and so there's been a lot of discussion of how to index that information, and Marty's been a staple in understanding the needs of everyone on that community. So we really do appreciate your help there, Marty, and your leadership. This has been a brief overview. You've seen where we've come from. You see the impacts that we're having, and a snapshot of where we're going in 2017. Part of this webinar, the benefit of it as well, was to open up for questions and discussion and see if anyone would like to offer some ideas or ask any questions of our staff. We can address the questions. You can post them by typing in the chat box, and we'll ask them or address them as they come up. So it looks like the first question that we have is, what are some of the implementation challenges you currently encounter at both the state and national level? Matt, would you like to address this one? If maybe you weren't on mute. You go, Matt.
Yes, there I am. Yes, sorry, I was trying to mute, beat me to the gun. Okay, so let me look at here. The question was, Sam, can you repeat that? I'm not seeing it on my screen.
What are some of the implementation challenges you're currently encountering at both the state and national levels?
So for some clarity, is it implementation challenges that states are having, or implementation challenges from our perspective? My guess is, okay, both. Perfect. If you look in the national plan as well as in like what RBFF just came up with, when folks are asked to prioritize what are the biggest challenges to doing R3, what always comes up is capacity questions. So implementation of the tactics, implementations of the strategies, the ideas for good programs, ideas for marketing, those aren't really the challenges that we're hearing right now. It's more of, how do I get money to do what I need to do? I don't have a full-time R3 position, so I'm trying to ask 4 other people to share pieces of their time. I don't have a database or licensed database system that will allow me to measure the impacts of my programs. So I would honestly say that we haven't actually messed around a whole lot with implementation challenges, because those are overshadowed by the capacity challenges right now. That's one of the things that I think underscores why these trainings are needed, or these workshops are needed, because so many folks are realized, okay, before we even figure out how we're going to adjust our programs, our efforts, our marketing strategies, before we get our partners, before we can, advise our partners on how to become engaged, we kind of have to get everybody on the same page. We need to talk about these capacity issues. We need agency-wide support. We need all the divisions within our agency or organization to understand what the problems are. So that's the era that we're in, is building capacity for R3, I think. Our challenge in doing these workshops is making sure that they're useful enough for agencies that when we leave, it's not like, well, that was cool, but now what the heck do we do? So that's something Sam and I are acutely aware of, and we're working on some of those resources, whether it's recording pieces of the workshops themselves, or after the workshops doing some video trainings on how do you take a customer-centric view, how do you help your partners identify where they can become engaged, and so forth.
Thank you, Matt.
Matt, this is John. Let me, yeah, Samantha, if I could add one thing. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, John.
Yeah, when you talk about capacity, I think one thing we have to realize that as we move forward with implementation, there's no single entity that's going to have the capacity to really move this plan, forward by themselves. And I think what we have to do is realize that the capacity out there in all of our partners, it has to be shared. We have to bring them together, and that's another reason we need to build these big partnerships, is so that we can reach the capacity needs that we're going to have together.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Is frequently after these workshops, or it happens in some of the surveys that we're starting to do after these workshops, is the recognition that this thing is too big for one organization. And I think that is true in probably every single case. So as we look toward building the capacity, and that's not only in money and bodies, but it's also expertise, knowledge capacity. What are the things that work? What are the things that don't work? As we work on building that within organizations, we have to recognize that the between organization capacity will likewise have to evolve. We have some early examples of that, but there's a lot of ground that needs to be broken on. Once you get your house in order, how do you move into the R3 neighborhood? And right now, most folks are still working on pretty hard on getting their own house in order so they know where they fit into the piece of the puzzle.
That's very well said. I think building on that is in some of the discussion that can happen at the national level. One of the questions asked is, what is the best way to set up one of the questions asked is there any details or thoughts on a nationwide R3 summit or conference? And I think a lot of the conversations you're suggesting that need to happen are going to happen with time, but also as we gather and build. John or Matt, would you add a little bit more?
I'll take a crack at it first. I think we learned a lot from the Western Midwest Summit that was held recently. We saw tremendous participation and a lot of interest in that. The council board, a little over a year ago, had a discussion about having some type of national symposium or a conference where we could bring a lot of different players together, not just the ones that are involved in the national plan now, but those that would have an interest in the future, and maybe a way too to bring more players to the table in this. And we've had a lot of discussions in the last few months about that, and I think we are looking at some point in 2018 to have a national workshop or a national symposium where we can bring a lot of the players together to share information, and as Matt referenced earlier, a higher level player possibly as well. It needs to be something that would bring in directors, bring in CEOs, maybe breakout sessions where we have workshops. We've got a lot of planning to do and a lot of discussions, but I think most definitely we're looking at some type of workshop or national forum that would be held in hopefully early 2018.
And
Matt,
I'll comment based on what the community told us at this last workshop, and I think there are really three things to consider. Number one is that we have to put together a steering committee of folks within the community to plan this thing, and folks at the right level. And again, I think the council will very generously court or facilitate that so that we can make sure we narrow down to the items that really need to get discussed. To that end, I think the other two aspects that came out when we asked folks at this last joint R3 Summit in Phoenix is that much of the success of that meeting occurred because we were in a small enough group where we could actually gnaw on regional or even local type problems and do some group thinking and come up with some actual solutions. That's not going to happen at a national meeting, and frankly, all of the people that would need to be present to have sort of a meaningful training type meeting aren't going to be able to get clearance to go to a national summit. So the thinking, and I believe this is probably correct, is that we need to keep the regional or state level workshops and summits going, because that's where the local expertise is really going to be the innovative part of R3. But from that local expertise is starting to emerge a series of sort of ubiquitous challenges and principles around R3 that are national in scope. And so this national meeting should focus on those national level issues and in order to bring on board other organizations, other stakeholders that up to now have been sort of on the fringes and haven't really understood what all this R3 stuff is about. So that's what we're hearing from the community. Get a committee, make sure we keep regional expertise training going on, and filter down to the national level issues that need to be brought to the light of day to all the stakeholders involved in R3.
Thank you, Matt. A national symposium that we're discussing here is something a lot of people have been asking, and this gives us a snapshot of what we might expect in 2018. There is another question posted by Jared from Illinois, who is new to the R3 community. Welcome, Jared. And it says, would it be possible to have a utility on the R3 site where mentors in my state could provide a short bio, hunting interests, and their geographic location, which could be queried by new hunters and individuals interested in hunting? All individuals would have to register on the R3 site before being able to query the information. This utility seems like it would be beneficial for setting up mentorships and providing digital mentors that could answer questions remotely. I am new to the R3 site, so maybe there's already something like this that I haven't discovered yet.
Yeah, I can take that one. So the R3 site, yeah, you can definitely build a group of mentors in your state that you can reach out to. You can post within your group, and you can ask questions through that platform and whatnot. There are some digital mentoring kind of stuff out there already. I mean, that might be a little removed from what the site's purpose is. The site is mostly for talking about these kind of issues, you know, the state and NGO kind of issues, not so much for the actual end consumer hunter fisherman. So if it was something for your mentors, if you want to educate them on a new article, or if you want to, you know, tell them about some good mentoring opportunities to help mentor other children, or, you know, anybody, that's more what we were thinking. Like Michaela Ray in Nebraska, she uses it to communicate with her core mentors that she, you know, she'll send out different articles, she'll send out updates and stuff like that. So that's kind of what we're more thinking the group function is for. As for other individuals, as in like wanting to find out or get questions answered about hunting and fishing and stuff, there are definitely other platforms for that.
Yeah, I'll just tack onto that real quick. Jared, kudos for being new to the site and identifying actually one of the primary things we've talked about a lot. The site, as Marty said, was designed for implementers, so we can have open, frank discussions about how do we implement R3, how do we strategize R3, and so it would probably be somewhat confusing and not very useful for your rank and file hunter or angler who isn't doing this stuff every day. But what you're talking about, the need for digital mentors, the need for engaging and mobilizing current hunters and anglers to not only be mentors, but give potential hunters, anglers, and trappers and shooters a place to find those mentors, that is one of the tips of the spear we're trying to crack. Powderhook, I know, is doing some of that in some pilot work in Kansas, but you're really hitting one of the things that as a community we need to tackle. The R3 website wasn't designed to handle that, but I think it's worth noting for the benefit of everybody on the call, this is a problem we still haven't solved, and we need to solve here coming up pretty quick.
All right, thank you, Matt and Marty. Jared, that's a very good question. I would encourage you, Jared, to maybe ask to join Michaela Ray's Nebraska group to get an idea of how she's utilizing that group function. The other states that are starting to launch this as well is, I would say, check out Iowa's group that's growing and see what they're doing. So another question that's been posed is, one of our struggles is data. How do we manage it? How do we use it for evaluation? And what is the council doing to address this issue? I'm going to begin by tackling that one, and then Matt and John or Cyrus, if you guys would like to comment, that'd be great too. The data struggle is a conversation I have daily now, whether it be an NGO such as NWTF or Pheasants Forever, or if it's the State Fish and Wildlife Agency that's trying to manage 5 different systems and getting them to quote unquote talk. We realize that data is some of the keys to our problems, because with data we have better communication with our constituents. With better data we have better ways to evaluate what programs are more efficient in the R3 process, and we can help to engage other partners by being able to share data on successful programs. So the topic of data is one that's out there and being discussed often. Moving forward, the Council has been active in a community-wide conversation on data dashboards, which in and of itself is based on the concept of the hunting and shooting sports participation matrix, which you can find on the National R3 website under the National Plan tab. I think it's Appendix B or C. And there's some explanation there on how it was piloted in Oregon and then used using a Tableau software to manage the data and start to drill down into some of the trends. We're constantly trying to push that level. Let me back up. That's a fantastic level to be at, for states to be working towards understanding their data and licensing trends better. That's what we're shooting for. But then others are pushing that level further, which is great about our community. Now people are questioning how to use those dashboards or use those evaluation tools to connect back to the participant and see, for instance, if a participant goes to, say, a mentored hunt at a partner organization even, and did that participant in that event come up in the license database? And when did they buy that license, before or after the event? That maybe simple question to people who aren't familiar with the data infrastructure could be answered, but when you get down into the weeds of the data and try to do the matching, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So the Council is also aware of the data standardization issues and categories, and we're talking with some people in our field that can help us understand that better first, and then hopefully educate the community to become more familiar on what the problem is, so we can start figuring out some solutions. So with that in mind, Matt or John, did you want to add anything on that conversation?
Samantha, this is John. I think you've done a good job of explaining some of this. There is a tremendous amount of engagement now in discussions relative to data management. There are a lot of hurdles there as well, because a lot of states, for example, have legislative restrictions on how information can be used, and we have to make sure that personal data is not compromised anywhere. But I think based on some of the conversations we've had with some of the private entities out there, I don't think we're very far from really solving a lot of the problems associated with data management and data sharing. The state's interested in this, the NGOs interested in this, and certainly industry would be. So I think it's an important topic, and it is certainly one of the challenges that we addressed early on as we began developing the national plan. And one of the questions, I think, is how can it be shared? And my only comment there is stay tuned, because I think in the next few months we're going to start getting some solutions to some of this.
So thank you, John. I think we have a couple more questions coming in. We have a little backward feed there. Okay. We have a couple more questions coming in, and one of them is there any agency interest or participation here in Illinois? Well, Neil Waters, I would encourage you to reach out to Jared Duquette on the R3 website. You're both in Illinois on that, so unless you're sitting in the same office, if that's the case, drop me a line and I can go through the registration website and see if anyone else pops up from Illinois. And then one other question is submitted is building on John and Matt's statement about capacity in many hands achieving this work, and realizing that right now the states seem to be doing the heavy lifting. What is the Council's plan to bring in federal agencies and their resources into this endeavor? So how can we engage people beyond the state fish and wildlife agencies, including the federal agencies, in tapping those resources? John, would you like to start with this question? I have some ideas, but I think you'd probably be the best one to answer that.
Yes. Fish and Wildlife Service has been a player in this with us, and we've had a lot of discussions, right up to at the director level, for example. I know the Forest Service has some interest. One of the problems we've had, I guess, is a timing issue more than anything else with our staff levels. But most definitely, when you look at the land base that's out there on our managed by these federal entities, they certainly warrant being key players within our national effort, and I think they will be. But again, I want to commend the Fish and Wildlife Service because we wouldn't even have a council had it not been for their effort. So I think you'll see more and more involvement. The door is certainly open there. And I think as we move forward, you will see more and more involvement from the federal entities out there.
I'll tack on a little bit. One of the challenges, and I think this is something we as a community need to work on better, is understanding the role of our federal partners a little bit better. Pardon me. When we wrote the national plan, we attempted to help define roles of what organization could tackle what parts of the R3 puzzle, and it was a struggle. We did some work with contacting representatives from all the sectors, really, from private sector, from industry, from NGO, from the feds, from states, and sort of asked, well, what do you see as your role in all of these questions, or all of these strategies in this overall R3 problem? And at that time, we got a lot of silence because folks just frankly didn't know. So I think one of the things that we need to work on more, and I would love to hear back from our federal partners who have now become versed in R3. I know there's a handful of you out there because you've been diligently attending a lot of these meetings and state agency workshops, is what do you see as the role for the feds and how can we engage that? I feel comfortable in sort of speaking for states and NGOs that I've talked to, and that there's no hesitation on the part of them to want to work with our Fed partners. There's just been a challenge in understanding how do we do that, and where do the federal agencies, where do their mission and their charges align with R3, and how can we get those to intersect with what the other organizations are doing. So I think it's a very good point. Thanks for bringing it up, and I would kind of push it back a little bit to some of you folks to let us know where do you see some of these nexuses, and I'm sure we can work on them.
And I'll add into the conversation too. I know within some of the regions, the staff, Matt, have been reaching out. And for an example, Fabian Romero or Richard Zane, they serve as the region hunter ed or aquatic ed or fed aid leads for the states. And I think some of the questions are getting offered to them about what R3 is and how to use it, and they're embracing it. They're trying to gather their groups together and have conversations. I've had 2 requests so far from different regions to add R3 to the agenda when the hunter ed administrators meet to discuss it and figure out those roles. So bravo to those leaders taking those first steps and trying to understand the rules better. We do appreciate it. Please know that our contacts and our phone numbers are available on the R3 website, but we're only a phone call or a text or an email away, and these are the types of conversations that are going to carry us. So we are hitting 1:55, and we do want to be respectful of people's time. So I think that'll be the last question. Thank you to everyone for joining us. I believe this is the largest R3 webinar we've had to this point. January is a great way to start off and hopefully drum up some support, but also some excitement for R3 efforts to come. You'll be receiving a survey via email. Please take a moment to complete that survey. Within that survey is an option to provide your name and information if you would like to host an R3 workshop in your state this year. We're looking ahead, we're constantly planning, so if that's something that you just even want to have a scoping conversation about, provide your information there, and I'll also provide the links